The power cut hit like a thief in the night, plunging the cramped Brooklyn apartment into darkness so thick it felt like drowning. Ethan Caldwell, 25, froze mid-step, his heart hammering as the hum of the city outside seemed to mock the sudden silence. He'd always hated the dark, ever since he was a kid, when shadows felt like hands reaching for him. Mateo. Ethan's voice cracked, barely above a whisper, as he fumbled through the living room, his sneakers scuffing against the hardwood floor. No answer, just the faint wail of a distant siren and the creak of the old building settling. He stretched out his hands, desperate for something, anything, familiar. His fingers brushed against a warm arm, and he gripped it like a lifeline. Mateo, you there? Yo. Chill. I'm right here, came Mateo Rivera's voice, low and steady, cutting through Ethan's panic like a blade. At 26, Mateo was the kind of guy who could laugh off a storm, his easy confidence a stark contrast to Ethan's tightly wound nerves. They'd been roommates for 6 months, thrown together by a Craigslist ad and a shared desperation to afford New York rent. Ethan, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking, and Mateo, a barista and aspiring musician with a grin that could light up a room, were an unlikely pair. Yet somehow they worked. The darkness pressed closer, and Ethan's grip on Mateo's arm tightened. Sorry, I hate this, he muttered, embarrassed by the tremor in his voice. Mateo didn't pull away. Instead, his hand found Ethan's, warm and calloused from guitar strings, and squeezed gently. Breathe, man. It's just a blackout. Happens all the time in this dump, Mateo said, his voice carrying that familiar teasing lilt. But there was something else in it, a softness Ethan hadn't noticed before. Come on, let's find the candles. They shuffled through the apartment together, hands still clasped, navigating the maze of furniture by memory. Ethan's pulse slowed, grounded by Mateo's presence. They found a stash of half-melted candles in a kitchen drawer, and soon, a flickering glow pushed back the darkness. The apartment came alive in the warm light, exposed brick walls, a sagging couch, and a coffee table littered with Mateo's lyric notebooks and Ethan's sketch pads. See? Not so bad, Mateo said, plopping onto the couch with a grin. His dark eyes sparkled in the candlelight, and Ethan felt a strange flutter in his chest. He sat beside Mateo, closer than usual, their knees brushing. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. They'd always danced around something unspoken. Late-night talks over cheap beer, Mateo's offhand compliments about Ethan's art, the way Ethan caught himself staring when Mateo practiced guitar shirtless on hot summer nights. But Ethan had never dared name it. He was too scared of ruining the fragile balance of their friendship, too scared of what it meant to want more. So, Mateo said, leaning back, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "What's the deal with you in the dark? You're like a cat in a thunderstorm." Ethan laughed, but it was shaky. "It's stupid. When I was a kid, my dad used to lock me in the basement when I acted out. Said it'd toughen me up. Just stuck with me, I guess." He hadn't meant to say that much. The vulnerability felt raw, like a wound exposed to air. Mateo's grin faded, replaced by something fiercer. "That's messed up, Ethan. You didn't deserve that." He shifted closer, their shoulders touching now. "You're safe here, you know. With me." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught like thorns. Instead, he looked at Mateo, really looked. The sharp angle of his jaw, the way his curls fell messily over his forehead, the quiet intensity in his gaze. The candlelight made him look like a painting, unreal and achingly real all at once. "Thanks," Ethan managed, his voice barely audible. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world shrank to just them. No blackout, no city, no past. Just this. Then the lights flickered back on, harsh and jarring, shattering the moment. Ethan blinked, disoriented, as Mateo let out a dramatic groan. "Well, there goes the vibe," Mateo said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. He stood, stretching, and Ethan felt the absence of his warmth like a physical ache. The rest of the night passed in a blur of normalcy. Mateo strumming his guitar, Ethan sketching in his notebook, but the air felt different, heavier. Ethan couldn't shake the memory of Mateo's hand in his, the way it had felt like an anchor. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew he wanted to find out. The next morning, Brooklyn buzzed with its usual chaos. Honking taxis, street vendors shouting, the faint hum of the subway beneath the pavement. Ethan sat at their tiny kitchen table, nursing a coffee and pretending to work on a freelance logo design. His eyes kept drifting to Mateo, who was sprawled on the couch, scribbling lyrics with a pencil tucked behind his ear. "You good, man?" Mateo asked without looking up, his voice casual but laced with something deeper. "Yeah, just thinking," Ethan said, dodging the truth. He was thinking about last night, about the way Mateo's touch had steadied him, about how he'd never felt so seen. But saying that out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. Mateo set his notebook down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You've been weird since the blackout. Spill it." Ethan's heart raced. He wasn't ready for this. Not for the questions, not for the answers he didn't fully understand himself. "It's nothing," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Mateo didn't buy it. He never did. "Bull. You're a terrible liar, Caldwell." He stood, crossing the room in 2 strides, and sat on the edge of the table, close enough that Ethan could smell his cologne, something warm and spicy. "Talk to me." Ethan's resolve cracked. "Last night when I grabbed you, I was freaking out, but you—" He stopped, searching for words. "You made it okay. You always do." Mateo's expression softened, but there was a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe, or fear. "You're not just talking about the blackout, are you?" Ethan shook his head, his pulse thundering. "I don't know what I'm talking about," he admitted, his voice raw. I feel something, Mateo, and it scares the hell out of me." The silence that followed was deafening. Mateo's eyes searched Ethan's, and for a moment, Ethan thought he'd ruined everything. Then Mateo reached out, his hand resting lightly on Ethan's wrist. "You think I don't feel it too?" he said quietly. "I've been trying to ignore it for months." Ethan's breath caught. "What?" Mateo laughed, a nervous edge to it. "Come on, man. The way you look at me sometimes. I'm not blind. But I didn't want to push you. Didn't want to mess this up." He gestured between them, his hand still on Ethan's wrist. "This us. It's good. Better than good." Ethan felt like he was falling, but for once, he wasn't afraid. He turned his hand, lacing their fingers together, and the world didn't end. It felt like it was just beginning. The days that followed were a delicate dance of stolen glances and tentative touches. Ethan and Mateo didn't talk about that morning, not directly, but the air between them crackled with possibility. They were still roommates, still friends, but every interaction carried a new weight. A brush of shoulders in the kitchen, a shared laugh over a bad movie, the way Mateo's voice softened when he said Ethan's name. Ethan threw himself into his work, hoping the distraction would steady his nerves. He was designing a poster for a local queer art festival, a project that felt more personal than usual. He'd never been open about his sexuality, not out of shame, but because he'd never had to confront it head-on. Growing up in a small Ohio town, he'd buried those feelings under layers of denial, telling himself it was easier to stay quiet. But now, with Mateo, those walls were crumbling. One evening, Mateo came home from his shift at the coffee shop, his apron slung over his shoulder and a mischievous grin on his face. "Got a surprise," he said, tossing a flyer onto the table. It was for an open mic night at a bar in Williamsburg. the kind of place where hipsters and artists mingled over overpriced cocktails. I signed up. You're coming. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Since when do you perform? Since I decided I'm done chickening out, Mateo said, his eyes bright with determination. Wrote a new song. It's personal. I want you there. Ethan's stomach flipped. He knew Mateo's music was his heart laid bare. Every chord, every lyric a piece of his soul. The thought of hearing something personal made Ethan's chest tighten with anticipation and dread. Wouldn't miss it, he said, hoping his voice sounded steadier than he felt. The bar was packed that night, a sea of flannel and piercings under dim neon lights. Ethan sat at a sticky table near the stage, nursing a beer and trying not to fidget. Mateo was backstage, probably pacing like he always did when he was nervous. Ethan scanned the crowd, noting the diversity, queer couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing, a lone poet scribbling in a notebook. It felt like a world he'd always been on the edge of, never quite stepping into. When Mateo took the stage, guitar slung over his shoulder, the room quieted. He looked different up there, vulnerable but powerful, his presence commanding attention. This one's for someone special, he said into the mic, his eyes finding Ethan's in the crowd. You know who you are. The song was raw, haunting, a story of longing and fear woven into every note. Mateo's voice carried a quiet strength, each lyric painting a picture of two people caught in a moment they couldn't name. Ethan's heart pounded as he listened, the words cutting straight to his core. In the dark, I found your hand / didn't know I'd need to land. It was about them, about that night, that touch, that unspoken pull. When the song ended, the crowd erupted, but Ethan barely heard it. He was on his feet, moving toward the stage before he could overthink it. Mateo stepped down, sweat on his brow, and their eyes met again. You liked it? Mateo asked, his voice hesitant. Ethan didn't trust himself to speak. Instead, he closed the distance between them and kissed him, right there in the middle of the bar, with the crowd cheering and the lights buzzing overhead. It was messy, impulsive, perfect. Mateo kissed him back, his hands cupping Ethan's face, and for a moment, the world was just them. Back at the apartment, reality crept in. They sat on the couch, knees touching, the weight of what they'd done settling between them. So what now? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mateo ran a hand through his hair, his usual confidence faltering. I don't know, man. I've dated guys before, but this feels different. You're different. Ethan's chest ached. He wanted this, wanted Mateo, but the fear was still there, clawing at the edges of his mind. I've never done this, he admitted. Not with anyone. I don't even know if I'm out. Mateo's eyes softened. You don't have to have it all figured out. We can take it slow. But I'm in, Ethan. All in. The words hit Ethan like a wave, washing away some of his doubt. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against Mateo's, and they stayed like that, breathing in sync. It wasn't an answer, but it was a start. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of newness. Ethan and Mateo navigated their relationship with cautious optimism, learning each other in ways they hadn't as roommates. They went on dates, awkward at first, then easy, like slipping into a favorite song. A picnic in Prospect Park, a late-night diner run, stolen kisses in the subway. Ethan felt like he was waking up after years of sleepwalking. But not everything was perfect. Ethan's fears lingered, especially when he thought about telling his family. His parents were traditional, their love conditional on him fitting into their narrow version of normal. He hadn't spoken to them in months, but the thought of coming out to them made his stomach churn. Mateo, on the other hand, was out and unapologetic, his family back in Puerto Rico accepting him with open arms. The contrast made Ethan feel like he was falling behind. One night, they were cooking dinner, Mateo's attempt at arroz con pollo, which was more enthusiasm than skill, when Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a text from his sister, Lila, asking if he was coming home for Thanksgiving. The question hit like a punch. He stared at the screen, his mind racing with scenarios of judgment and rejection. "You okay?" Mateo asked, glancing over from the stove, where he was wrestling with a pot of rice. Ethan set the phone down, his hands shaking. "My sister. She wants me to come home for the holidays. But I don't know if I can." Mateo turned off the burner and crossed the room, sitting beside Ethan at the table. "What's stopping you?" Ethan hesitated, the words heavy. "They don't know about me. About this." He gestured between them, his voice cracking. "What if they hate me for it?" Mateo took his hand, his grip firm. "They might not get it right away. Hell, they might never get it. But you're not doing this for them. You're doing it for you. For us." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the fear was a knot in his chest. "What if I lose them?" "Then you've got me," Mateo said, his voice fierce. "And I'm not going anywhere." The words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the dread. Ethan knew he'd have to face his family eventually, but for now, he leaned into Mateo, letting his warmth anchor him. The tension came to a head a week later. Ethan had agreed to a video call with his parents, his first in months. He sat on his bed, laptop balanced on his knees, Mateo hovering in the doorway for moral support. The call started innocently enough, small talk about work, the weather, Lila's new job. But then his mom asked, "Are you seeing anyone, Ethan? You're not getting any younger." Ethan's mouth went dry. He glanced at Mateo, who gave him a small nod. "Yeah, I am," he said, his voice unsteady. "His name's Mateo." The silence on the other end was deafening. His mom's face froze, and his dad's jaw tightened. "What do you mean, his dad asked, his tone sharp. Ethan's heart pounded, but he pushed forward. "I'm dating a guy. I'm gay." The words felt foreign, but saying them out loud was like shedding a weight he'd carried for years. His mom started to cry, and his dad's voice grew cold. "This isn't how we raised you," he said. "You need to think about what you're doing to this family." The call ended abruptly, and Ethan sat there, numb. Mateo was at his side in an instant, pulling him into a hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "That was brave as hell." Ethan buried his face in Mateo's shoulder, tears stinging his eyes. "They hate me." "They don't," Mateo said, his voice firm. "They're shocked. They need time. But you were honest, and that's what matters." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the rejection stung. Still, Mateo's arms around him felt like a promise, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Months passed, and Ethan and Mateo's relationship deepened. They faced challenges. Ethan's family remained distant, but Lila reached out, offering quiet support. She even visited Brooklyn, meeting Mateo, and instantly hitting it off over their shared love of bad reality TV. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Ethan threw himself into his art, channeling his emotions into a series of illustrations for the Queer Art Festival. The pieces were raw, vibrant, a celebration of love and identity that caught the attention of a local gallery. When they offered him a solo show, Mateo was the first to celebrate, lifting Ethan off the ground in a bear hug that left them both laughing. The night of the gallery opening was electric. The space was packed, fairy lights strung across the ceiling, Ethan's artwork glowing on the walls. Mateo stood by his side, proud and steady, as Ethan fielded compliments from strangers. One piece stood out, a painting of two hands clasped in the dark, candlelight illuminating their edges. It was called "The Lights Went Out," and it was their story. As the night wound down, Mateo pulled Ethan outside to the gallery's small courtyard. The city hummed around them, but it felt distant, like they were in their own world. "I've got something for you," Mateo said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a new song, handwritten, titled Anchor. It's about you, Mateo said, his voice soft. About how you make me feel grounded. Like I can be myself, no matter what. Ethan's eyes stung as he read the lyrics, each word a mirror of his own feelings. He looked up at Mateo, who was watching him with a mix of nerves and hope. I love you, Ethan said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Mateo's face lit up, his grin brighter than the city lights. I love you too, he said, pulling Ethan into a kiss that felt like coming home. The blackout that started it all became a story they told with laughter, a turning point that reshaped their lives. Ethan's family was still a work in progress, but he'd found a new kind of family in Mateo, in Lila, in the community they were building. The darkness had once been his fear, but now it was a reminder of the moment he reached out and found something worth holding on to. Their love wasn't perfect. It was messy, complicated, full of doubts and triumphs. But it was theirs, and in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, that was enough. They'd faced the dark together and come out stronger, their hands still clasped, their hearts still beating in sync. The lights might go out again, but Ethan knew now. They'd always find their way back to each other.